Well, let's jump right in. My name is Andy McMillan. I am a filmmaker based in Charlotte, North Carolina. Maybe you've heard of it. I made a feature documentary with Tim Grant that screened at this festival. Was that 2 years ago, Tim? Sure. Teamwork. Anyway, so I'm just going to do a little intro, and then we'll kind of jump right in. First of all, thanks for coming out. Thank you to the Charlotte Film Fest and Independent Picture House. It's pretty awesome to see the turnouts for all the events this week in our city here of Charlotte. So the panel today is the Business of Indie Filmmaking. So I've known Thomas since I was probably 15 years old, and the other two filmmakers, Aaron and Natalie, a matter of a couple days and a couple minutes. Yeah, so just like you guys, I'm excited to hear from them and hear about their approaches to filmmaking. So we'll start with Natalie. Natalie Metzger is a Spirit Award-nominated producer and VP of Production and Development at Vanishing Angle, where she champions bold, genre-defying independent films like the WGA Award-nominated It Ain't Over, Werewolves Within, Greener Grass, which premiered at Sundance, Thunder Road, which won the Grand Jury Prize at South by, and Tina Romero's Queens of the Dead. She is currently in post-production on the coming-of-age drama Under the Lights, with Lake Bell, Randall Park, Mark Duplass, and Nick Offerman, and the murder mystery comedy Kill Me with Charlie Day, Allison Williams, Giancarlo Esposito, and Aya Cash. She is also an award-winning writer and director. Thomas Torrey, yeah, give it up. Thomas Torrey is a writer, director, producer whose production company Bad Theology has produced 3 feature films, including 2017's rideshare thriller Fair, which the LA Times called stunning.
They did.
The 2020 Mindbender Minor Premise, which Forbes called one of the best sci-fi thrillers of the past decade, and the newly released musical drama, which my brother John Mark McMillan is in, called Long December, winner of the 2024 One in a Million Award at the Sun Valley Film Festival. Aaron Harvey, on the end, is an independent filmmaker based in North Carolina. His most recent feature was the 2019 theatrically released Into the Ashes. His feature, The Neighbor, was an official selection of over 20 international film festivals and was released theatrically by Vertical Entertainment. His feature, Catch 44, starring Forrest Whitaker, Malin Ackerman, and Bruce Willis, was released in 2011. He's currently in post on his latest feature, Come With Me, starring Theo Rossi and Ron Perlman. Aaron runs his own production entity, Michael Bruce Pictures, and was one of the founding members of Annapurna Pictures, maybe you've heard of it, where he was actively involved in the company's initial slate of films, including Her, The Master, and Zero Dark 30, among others. So this is a very rad group of filmmakers. Stoked about this. So, to begin, what is the best movie? I'm kidding. No, but really, I wanted to start. I think bios are great, but you really get to know filmmakers through their taste, right? So I'm interested, what's something you've seen recently that has just lit your pants on fire that you can't quit thinking about? It could be in the past year and a half. Even if you hated it, even if there was something that stuck in, you just couldn't stop thinking about it, though. Go ahead, Natalie.
Honestly, Alien Earth is what I've been obsessed with recently. Sci-fi is my favorite genre, and I obviously love the original Alien, and I feel like this new series is the closest to the original Alien that I've seen, and love it.
Amazing.
I just saw one battle after another, and it's as advertised. It's fantastic. If you're a PTA fan, or just it's entertaining, it's meaningful, it was really incredible. But even thinking about indie film, a couple I've seen that are, on the cheap. Last Stop in Yuma County, they made for like $1 million, fantastic film. And The Artifice Girl, which they looked like they made for $2.50, incredible film. Those are great films to just inspire you to make films on the cheap.
And what about them? What did it for you?
Last Stop in Yuma County is just this great single location sort of pulpy crime film that it's just a slow burn that has sort of a great twist, and it's just a great example of doing a film. It's an ensemble kind of crime film that does it really well. The Artifice Girl is it's a sci-fi film that really takes place inside. It's essentially 3 scenes. It's like the first 30 minutes, the second 30 minutes, and the third. And it's about sort of this AI creation who tracks online sexual predators. And it's just an example of if you have something that is just incredibly well written in the dialogue, you can film it with no money, with no stars, with just your friends, and it can really get an international audience. So they're both great.
Oh, yeah.
I think we're sharing a mic, sorry. Probably the last film I saw that was really like, whoa, was The Stranger a couple years ago. A Thomas Wright movie, which was awesome. That's a tough one for me because I'm such a weirdo for like certain directors, and I like Nitram was a great film, Justin Kurzel's movie a couple years ago. That was really affecting. Eddington I liked. That was this year. That was good.
I loved that.
Yeah, Eddington was awesome. I mean, Ari can't miss. It's tricky, man. I mean, I can't wait to see one battle after another because PT is obviously like a favorite of everybody, so that I'm excited. But probably Andrea Arnold's film Bird was really good. That was this year, I think, as well. So I don't know. My tastes are a little tricky. It's hard.
No,
What about you, Andy?
Oh, so glad you asked. I watched this movie called Still Walking by Hirokazu Koreeda.
That's a great movie. I love
It's
Still Walking.
so good. Koreeda's awesome. It has this incredible sense of visual economy. He just doesn't. There just aren't very many shots, but it doesn't feel unnecessarily slow. And because there's just not a lot of shots, if he ever cuts away from the action, it's so meaningful. That one kind of blew me away. And I didn't go to film school, so I'm still, catching up on a lot of films. And the other one last year that I think about almost every day is Army of Shadows, the Melville movie, which Priya recommended. Yeah. So let's take first of all, Tim, is that Aaron's mic right there? So you actually do have a mic, yeah. So now we can do better harmonies if we need to. So we'll just go right down the line on this. To begin, how did you get into film? What was your route to it?
My route to film was making VHS movies with my brother in the 80s and 90s growing up. Indiana Jones inspired us to make our own version, Terminator, Lethal Weapon. So I've been making films since I was editing tape to tape. And then I pursued the industry really as an actor, and I acted a lot through high school at a high level, and then after high school really pursued writing and directing. Studied film at Sarah Lawrence College in New York, and stayed around New York for a little bit, and then have been in Charlotte really for the last 15 years working on the independent side. Features are a marathon. I have another company that's my day job doing, documentary content for small businesses, but it's nothing but film day and night between those two.
I started in the theater and dance world. I double majored in theater and dance in college and thought I was going to start my own dance theater company, and ended up kind of taking a left turn. I went to grad school at CalArts, and while I was getting my master's in choreography, I started helping my film school friends out with their films, and then started filming my own choreography, and just thought it was kind of a fun side hobby until my film school friends started recommending me to their friends, and I started getting emails saying, hey, will you produce my film the way that you did your film, the way that you helped so-and-so's film? I'll pay you this amount of money. And it was this light bulb moment of, I can get paid to do this? This is awesome. I was just helping people out. And so from there, I just started reading as much as I could. I went to libraries and bookstores, tried to read as much about film production as I could because I didn't go to film school, and just learned a lot on the job, and short films became commercials and music videos, which became pilots, which became features.
That's awesome. You'll have to share your syllabus with me. And where are you based? You're not in North Carolina, are you?
No, I'm in LA.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, but from Florida originally, so, and have been coming to Blowing Rock since I was a baby. So North Carolina connection, Southeast connection.
Awesome.
Yeah, no, I didn't go to film school either. I just love movies. Since I was, in high school and then in college, me and my roommate would watch 2-3 films a day, and every day we were like, oh my God, just obsessing over things. And I went to school, actually here at Upstate, and then got a business degree because I was like, well, what am I going to do that at least could be something that could, wash any other job. So, but I got out of school and had this weird kind of existential moment where I was like, I got to at least try to go make movies. Like, I don't know what that means. I didn't know anybody anywhere. Growing up here, it was the farthest thing from Hollywood was literally us geographically. So I just kind of on a whim moved to LA and started working with actually a friend I had connected with here in Charlotte. And we kind of went together. He had no experience. We knew nobody, but we were like, well, we can go with, at least we got each other. Let's just see what happens. And just started working on projects and finally kind of came to the realization that, I wanted to make movies. I always wanted to direct films and make my own films, but I was like, how's that gonna happen? What are you, what's the door in? Because there's not really a door, but I was like, okay, like everybody kind of realizes, let me write material that somebody else wants to make and then kind of leverage myself into the director chair, so to speak. So I started writing when I was there and working on little projects in the interim, kind of a crash film school on small sets and being involved with $200,000 films, which is really awesome because you're doing everything, with everybody, so you get a really hands-on kind of experience. But I just started writing and got lucky and somewhat fortunate because my writing's always been naturally fairly good, just what it is. And so I had a couple scripts that connected in and ended up, getting an agent at William Morris and got my first movie made because of my writing. And so that's kind of how it started. But it's a very truncated version. I mean, it was, 5 years in LA, running around, beating the pavement, working on projects, writing, and then finally the first one kind of worked its way to fruition, and there we go. You just keep the momentum and keep going. But yeah.
And was there a specific moment that you recall where, I think for most people, even that are film obsessed, the idea of it being having an actual life in film and career in it still seems fairly abstract. Was there a moment where you realized like, oh, this could be a real thing, where it went from that sort of aspirational thing to a real career path?
I mean, yeah. Let me preface this by saying I never really wanted to work in film. This sounds terrible to say that. I didn't want to work on set. I was like, dude, I'll just get a normal job. I wanted to make my own movies, and that was kind of it. It was sort of ride or die. Let's see if this can actually happen. And then I did get, again, fortunate because it was kind of a perfect confluence of a moment in time, the right script, the right kind of actors. And so my first movie was actually a way bigger movie than probably should have been. And that was when I was like, dude, if this is how it is, this is gonna be great, easy, no problem. We're just gonna keep making movies. And then that film was like going through the seventh circle of hell with some of the producers and the financing that was involved in that. And it was just like the most disillusioning experience ever. Even though I'm proud of the movie, we had a great time, and it was obviously very fortunate to do it. It was called Catch 44. But it was like a $13 million movie, and I was 27 years old or 8, and so it was this bizarre, surreal kind of situation where it was like I knew it was totally not the norm, but also like, well, maybe this is normal if you plug in the right way. But when you're doing a movie like that, you're obviously thinking like, oh, this is a viable thing. Now we're to have a career, but every project is kind of it could be your last. So I. Took a lot of lessons from that to make the subsequent movies afterwards. But that was the first time I was really like, all right, maybe this is actually a thing. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. And Aaron, we'll start with you, but come back down this way. So is there a practical lesson you did learn from that early film, and all of you from one of your first films that you think of still to today?
How many hours do we have? No. You learn every time you do a film. Every project, you're always constantly learning. But, with that one specifically, in my situation, it was a lot of like what not to do. To be honest, I was like, okay, am I the only one telling the creative line here? Like, am I the guy waving the flag? You know, everyone's there. It's like this huge tier 3 crew. People are, you know, looking at their clock all the time. It's not, it was just, it was almost a, like I said, a disillusioning moment for me because I was like, is this what it is? I don't know if I want to do this. This is crazy. So I kind of, everything I learned on that movie and had experienced in that, making that project, I just kind of did the opposite on the next one and made a really small movie with a bunch of friends and people, and, you know, it was $500,000 and it was the best experience ever, and kind of rebuilt the machine. But it's, yeah, I mean, you learn a lot. I mean, it's hard to get into super specific because there's so many stories I could talk about, but it was, discernment is probably the biggest one. Know who you're working with. Like, understand and surround yourself with the people that are kind of aligned with what you're really trying to do, or the vision of the project, or, you know, everybody's got to be pointed in the right direction. I think was the big thing I learned from that one, because you think it's like that, but then you get into it you go into battle with people and you're like, oh my God, none of these motherfuckers care about what we're doing. I'm the only guy here doing it, you know, so I got really strategic about working with specific friends and people people you trust, you know, and the people who have your back and understanding what that means and what it, you know, are really knowledgeable about what they're doing. So, because it's hard, man. Making a movie is, you know, like flogging yourself. So you got to be doing it with your buddies. Otherwise, why do it? So.
Yeah, I guess the downside to having a budget is people could potentially take the gig for the money.
Yeah, you definitely get that.
Which a lot of times isn't an issue.
No, you quickly vet out who's there to really be there versus, you know, who's there to just get paid, which, hey, again, there's nothing wrong with getting paid. I'm not averse to, like, hey, you do a big movie, that's fine. Hallelujah, everybody gets money. But, you know, I didn't get into it to make money. It was about, I just want to make cool films, and I know what I like, and I know the movies I want to see and make. And so, you know, I think that's, helped me, too. Keeping the purity has been good. Like, agents and actors and people recognize that, like, that's why I'm doing it. I'm not, you know, if I want to make money, I'll go work for, you know, Bank of America, you know, so.
And Natalie, how about you? Any early lessons that have stuck with you?
I feel like I learned tenacity and persistence really early on, and I think that served me in subsequent projects. But really early on, after I had started making dance films, I wanted to make a feature documentary, and it was about, you know, a really personal subject, and I knew that there was no one else that was going to make it. And I spent a lot of time trying to fundraise for it. And, you know, fundraising for an independent documentary, as I think we all know, is very hard. I knew that there was a couple companies I think might want to contribute to the budget. And I had talked to, you know, different people at the companies, being like, you know, their head of marketing or different people, and being like, hey, I think this might be something. And I kept on getting no's. And I was like, I heard the CEO speak at an event, and I was like, I just need to get to him. And so I knew his first name and his last name, so I started guessing at emails. I just did first name dot last name at thecompany.com, first initial last name at thecompany.com, you know, and just did lots of different variations until I didn't get a bounce back. And then a week later, I heard back, and he was like, this sounds amazing. Let me loop in my head of marketing, and let's figure out how to make this happen. And then the head of marketing, of course, was like, great, you know, like, who had just told me no, you know, months before. And then that, you know, that company came in, and then once one company came in, I was able to get other companies on board to cobble together the budget. And so I kind of learned really early on of just you have to think outside the box, you have to be tenacious, and you kind of can't take no for an answer. You have to be persistent, so.
Opportunity, too. I think you're speaking to the same thing. That's one thing I've said to everybody that ever in LA, buddies. It's like, dude, you have to be opportunistic. Because so many people in town, especially in LA, because I was in LA for 20 years, too. I just came back to Charlotte. But you especially there, you run around and you meet people, and it's like, there's a lot of, like, people have chips on their shoulder, there's an expectation, or like, oh, I'm gonna get $1 million in my camera because I just finished film school at USC, and you're like, bro, you don't even know what's coming, dude, what are you talking about? So I think being opportunistic is another thing that's part of being tenacious, you know.
How about you, Tom?
Yeah, one of the biggest things I learned with my first feature is, you know, the indie film world is not waiting for my debut. You know, if you wanted to make films your whole life, you sort of believe your own hype that, you know, you've got this extra set of gifts and the indie world's waiting, because we read the junk food of every year those small filmmakers who kind of make it with their nothing feature. And I had been prepping my first feature for a long time, years, wrote it, prepping it, starts and stops, never got made. And then I finally just stripped myself of the pretentiousness of like trying to get that made, and I was like, I just need to get something made into the marketplace so I can learn this side of the business, because I had been making shorts. I studied school, but there's nothing like getting a feature into the marketplace. So my partner and I had 25 grand in the bank that his father-in-law gave us as like a seed investment, and of which was supposed to be the first 25 grand to several $1 million. And I said, what if we just take that 25 grand and make like a prototype film? And because I grew up in the theater, I was like, you can make a film in 90 minutes. You can tell a story in real time. There's nothing, stopping me from just making a play. And so we came up with this idea, a guy in a car, an Uber driver who finds himself driving the man who's secretly sleeping with his wife. And from there, we just wrote this chamber drama that was a 60-page script, maybe less, maybe 55 pages. And it was just a dialogue-driven, real-time drama that we shot in 3 days for $5,000, spent the rest of that 20 grand on like a sound mix and color grade, and brought it to market. And it did well. It premiered at Newport Beach. It won festivals. It sold, and it's out there. And it was the best example of just, because I always thought this other film would be my big debut. And that other film got made, like I gave it to another director. I didn't even make that other film. It got made elsewhere. And it was just the best first film for me because it was something that happened so quick in a pressure cooker before we had a chance to realize this is probably a bad idea. You just wrote a script and you're going to shoot it a month later. But it's definitely one of a kind, so I wouldn't do it any other way.
I mean, I think making things is a great idea. Like just, especially these days, just finding a way to get things made. So I feel like some of what I'm hearing and some of the lessons learned, especially from Aaron, is about partnership. And I know it's something that I found very intimidating when I was considering getting into film was how intense the collaboration is, how much you have to depend on other people. And you always hear directors say, 90% of directing is casting. And I think that extends beyond your cast and in casting your collaborators as well. So, Natalie, we'll start with you. In the very early stages of a project, specifically when you're producing, what is it you're looking for in a partner? If someone brings a film to you or you discover a talent at a film festival or something, what is it that makes you think, I can and will make a movie with this person?
I get asked this question a lot, and it's really tough because a lot of it is just like a gut feeling, and a lot of it is just, I'll see a film at a film festival and be like, ooh, who made this? This is such a unique voice. This is so cool. But more often, the projects that I end up making are introductions from friends of friends. It's like, hey, I think you would really connect with this person. You should meet with them. And then I meet with them, and we just hit it off, and I read their project, and I just become obsessed with it. And there's something about a vibe that a filmmaker gives of just knowing what they want it to be, but also being open to a dialogue, and just someone that's interesting and cool that I want to spend the next year of my life working with. So yeah, it's a more kind of organic, raw process than a really clear workflow or check marks for what I look for. But yeah, I mean, I love bold voices, unique stories, and someone that's pleasant to work with.
And let me rephrase a little bit. What makes you say nope?
I think that I have said no to filmmakers when I see that there is an ego that can't be collaborated with, when it's it's like my way or the highway. And listen, filmmaking, the director is the head honcho, and it's, I as a producer am trying to help facilitate that director's vision. I often see myself as the midwife, right? The director's the one having the baby, and I'm the one that's trying to help that baby actually get out and grow up into the world. But as part of that, there has to be a give or take. Obviously, you're working with limited resources, whether it's time, whether it's budget, it's usually both. And there's also just the nature of, sometimes if you live in your own silo and are not open to feedback, it sometimes makes for lesser projects. And so I think an openness to collaboration, and when I see someone that's just kind of walled off to that, then that's a red flag for me.
Sure. And Thomas, especially, you know, on like smaller indie projects where it's a combination of cashing in favors sometimes and recruiting your friends. That can also be a little complicated with choosing who to work with. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, and I mean, the first film, the one I mentioned, was definitely cashing in favors because, you know, that was such a small budget, but I was also like, hey, I'm only going to take a week of your time, and I paid them all in the back end. Everybody who worked on that for free, deferred, actually got paid, you know, once we sold the film. But even the most recent film, Long December, that was a film that we, you know, Sing Sing has this model of everybody making the same amount. I was like, well, we did that on Long December. Everybody got paid the same. It was $500 a day, which is actually a lot more than the standard indie, certainly less than, you know, commercial projects. But everybody got paid the same rate, and because the crew is smaller, so we could pay people more because the crew is much smaller, so people were wearing different hats. Part of it is I've been in this town for a long time, and hopefully I've developed relationships and reputation to where it's something like, hey, I'm doing this project, you know, people are there and willing to do it. But there's also a sense of, you know, having people who are catching the same vision. I mean, the projects that I make, I'm a writer-director, so I'm, you know, hopefully, you know, creating something with a sense of meaning. And so as people read that and they find a deeper sense of meaning in the material, that's a good sign. And I've had those conversations with actors especially. We've talked to some great actors on projects, and it's clear they're not really forming a connection to the material, and I kind of don't know what to do with that as a director. It makes me very nervous versus the next guy who's like, you know what, when I read this, I saw my own alcoholism in this and stuff that I wasn't even writing in it. So finding a deeper connection to the material is an incredible sign, and it really makes for, I think, a beautiful community sort of driven experience. And I'm a big guy in community and culture, you know. I run nice sets. We don't work 14 hours, you know, these are like 10-hour days mostly, and everyone's sort of friends, and I want it to feel like, you know, camp, like a good community experience, and that's something I think about, and what makes it fun, and hopefully the next time I need to do one, all the, you know, the talented people in town are able to help.
And how many days did y'all shoot?
Long December, the film I just did, was a 12-day shoot. It was actually 9 days principal, and then we came back for 3 extra. Well, one day was sort of a travel day, and then 2 extra, but 12 all in, and that was a $300,000 budget that we shot here in town. And you know, we were able to do that because the local community really came and rallied around me, and we got that film made.
That's great. And Aaron, how about you? Could you talk about some of that decision making with collaborators?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, part of your job, making the film, especially kind of speaking what Tom's talking about, being the director, it's like, and a producer, obviously, to a point, it's, at least for me, it's always been being able to see the talent in somebody, like, hey, this guy's better than me, this collaborator is going to bring to the project something that I couldn't bring, you know, or like, all our visions are aligned. I mean, and that's hard, that's a tricky thing to do, and it's hard to kind of understand that, and some of that, it's, you know, you can't teach that. It's just a skill, or it's just an ability you have to kind of understand the person and read the person. Or, you know, I mean, even on my first movie, I remember I had a buddy who was at AFI. He was a director fellow, and so we went to see all the thesis films that year at the ArcLight, and it was cool. And you know, you're watching all these amazing short films back to back to back that are like as much as features cost. And all of a sudden, this one popped up, and it was just looked like no other film in there. And I was like, who shot this movie? This is fucking crazy. Did Kaminsky go back to film school? What is this? You know. And so I made my buddy introduce me to the DP of that movie, who happened to be like my exact same age. It was weird. A lot of weird overlap just in our personal lives. But he, and I was like, this guy's that's talent. Like, this dude has the sauce, right? You know, you could just see it, even though it was just a student film. And so, you know, even on that movie I was lobbying so hard to have him shoot it. And of course, you know, the financiers and producers are like, no, we're not letting 2 first-time, you know, kids fly the plane into the mountain. You know, I don't think so. So I had to, like, I was working with them for about 6 months putting it together, thinking this is all good. And then I ended up having to get somebody else, you know, which is fine. I mean, I wasn't going to not make the movie. But I said, dude, we're doing the next movie together. And then we did. And then, you know, the proof was in the pudding after the fact. Because I was like, dude, forget the resume for 2 seconds. Like, look at the ability, dude. This kid is crazy talented. The photography is amazing. And then, sure enough, he's gone on. He's had a big, you know, career now himself. But it's being able to, like, recognize that kind of stuff, I think, is a skill that you should have, you know, as a producer and a filmmaker, like putting projects together, being able to really go, dude, this is this guy's strength. This person is the best person for the thing I'm doing with the constriction, you know, the budget, the time, what we have to play with. being able to stack that kind of team around you is very important, and also simultaneously very difficult, because you get a lot of eager people, and people do want to work on projects, but it's kind of like, how do you vet through that and kind of find your way through the mud to get to where everybody's really, again, gelling, and you're making the best version of the thing that you're doing. That's hard. I mean, I've found that to be difficult. So.
And kind of jumping around a little bit topic-wise, each of you writes, right? Do you all write and direct? So something coming from the doc side of it, something that sounds crazy about that to me is like when you're directing and editing a doc, the process is so long you lose your eyes, and you have to absolutely fight to retain any ability to see your own film. What is that like when you're writing it, then you're directing it, then you're involved with the edit? Is that something that y'all struggle with too, or is that a thing I'm making up?
Well, it's a good distinction. I mean, I've done a lot of documentary work as well, and you are very much writing the piece, but just in reverse. Usually, you capture the material, then you're writing it. And I've seen the overlaps in my documentary work and in my narrative work. For me, the guiding light is the moment of meaning in the film, in the thing I'm writing. It all adds up to some meaning. You could call it theme. That would be, a good sort of, film school sort of idea. But the thing I am trying to say, the thing that I have in mind to say, the piece of meaning. And so for me, that once I figure that out in the script, that's the guiding light that kind of makes the harder work of actually completing a screenplay. It keeps me on course. And then in the same way, when you're making a film, it's so easy to get bogged down into the shot within the context of a day, in the context of a week, in a whole schedule, and they're not all going to be great. And I was having this conversation with my DP, who we were having to make compromises, and I'm like, we got to get this shot. And but it's not going to be great. And I was like, the film is made in the macro. It's not made in this scene. If we have too many crappy scenes, it'll be a bad movie. But it's okay. Like, don't lose sight of the fact that this is all going to add up to something. And that he was like, okay, I trust you. And we made a good movie. There's certainly bad shots in the movie, maybe even a bad scene or two, but hopefully it's a good movie because it's got something to say, and I'm keeping that core meaning intact. And the edit process is the process of, okay, here's the thing that I shot, now what do I have to work with? What does this want to be? Is the thing I set out to make even possible? And a lot of times it's not, unless I can maybe go do reshoots. But sometimes the film tells you, you know what, you thought it was going to be this, it might actually be this. And I've done so many small projects, which is what you were talking about. Just go make things. If you can't make features, go make 100 short films, because the more you get experience at having an idea, shooting an idea, editing an idea, you get used to that depth that is required to be like, okay, what was the idea? What's in front of me? What is the best thing I can make from this? And sometimes you hit the bullseye. Sometimes, most of the time, it's not quite what you thought it could be. Every now and then, it's better. This added up to something more than I could have dreamed because the collaborators or because of some magic that happened. And I live for those moments. And so, but it all comes back to that central idea of what does this mean, this story, for me.
Yeah, I think maintaining objectivity can be tough when you're writing and directing. For me, it's easy in the script and the actual shooting, but I think in the edit, that's when you have so much baggage from what you've shot and from how long it took to get whatever scene, that I find that that's why I like to have an editor do their pass without any input from me first, just so I can see, like, just with the puzzle pieces that they have, what do they think this is, and that can give me some perspective. And it's also why I oftentimes try to not have the editor come visit set, because I don't want them to know that it took us 8 hours to get this one scene because of the rain machine and all that stuff, because if that scene doesn't work or is shitty, then I want them to cut it, and I don't want them to have any reason to not cut it except for that, whether it's a good scene or a bad scene, and whether it works with what we actually shot. And it's oftentimes why we are really kind of fanatical about doing feedback screenings. So, because you can work with the editor, but the editor still read the script. They still have the context that a normal audience coming in to see a movie is not going to have. And so we'll do feedback screenings sometimes every week. We'll work ourselves and get to a good place. But then, as we're kind of working towards picture lock, we'll do feedback screenings every week with just different filmmakers or just random people that might not have any experience or connection with the script. And just say like, hey, like what is confusing? Like what needs clarification? Like what are you bumping on? And some of those feedback screenings have really helped guide the edit for us, so much so that like to us it's an essential part of the process to get that objectivity.
Yeah, how targeted do you get with those? Do you go into it with where in your mind you're like, there's one scene I need to know if it's being read this way, or is it just kind of general feedback without guiding them?
We leave it really open, but then in our talkbacks afterwards, we'll usually have like a little questionnaire, and then we'll just kind of like lead a chat afterwards, and that's the time when we can ask about specific places. But oftentimes the things that we're worried about being a problem, it'll become clear whether it's a problem or not with just people discussing it in the moment. And and sometimes a feedback screening, You'll recognize a problem that you didn't realize was a problem, and then you'll fix it for the next feedback screening, but then that creates a domino effect from something else, and so it's always like a calibration. But
and back to more sort of on the business side, I'm interested, what's the most important question to ask yourself when you're setting something up? So when you're first trying to get a movie off the ground, what's the thing that you have to make sure you're being totally honest with yourself about? If there is one.
I mean, that's a weird question, because you're taking money from people to make this conceptual thing. So it's a bit of like, you have a responsibility to a degree. And I think that like for us, when we go into projects, when I make a movie, it's like, I mean, Thomas was talking about this a minute ago. The bridge from and also making little short things and make stuff is good, because the exercise of like going from conceptual to practical is just that bridge is so huge, and it's always like everyone talks about movies, and I'm gonna make a movie now. I'm like, dude, just go make a short. You'll see what it really looks like. The bridge is long and tricky, but I think when you're setting a movie up, it's like I always say, we're just gonna make this movie as smart as we can, as far as like insulating the money that we're given to the degree that we can then work within this box and not feel like constrained by some financial overlord hanging over us, and be able to go, look, we've at least like hedged this film enough to take the risk creatively, because I think it's foolish, because I want longevity. I mean, I want to keep making movies. I don't want to do one film and go get my rich dentist friend to give me $1 million and cast my high school buddy and shoot ourselves in the foot. Like, what's the point of that? So you gotta being aware of how to make a smart movie, I think, is important, beyond just a creative, because there's always this kind of, misperception maybe of like all the auteur filmmakers we love, Paul, Thomas, and all these guys. It's like they just have money thrown at them, and they just creative geniuses, and they just work in this vacuum. And it's like, dude, all these dudes are business guys. Like, they're all businessmen. I mean, that's what's crazy. Working at Annapurna was cool to see firsthand. The first questions out of 90% of these guys' mouths are like, what's the budget? How much money? They're talking about all the stuff that you don't think they would be worried about. John Hillcoat, we had to shut down production on Lawless for a week so he could go make a $900,000 paycheck on the UPS commercial or whatever it was. The business is omnipresent. So and they're smart about it. They know, this is how. If I have, this $1 million, but I've got these actors that kind of make sense for that budget, and I can make the movie in the amount of time that I have, I can do whatever I want, basically. And I think a lot of people, that's some of that's just experience and learned over time and doing, and fumbling through it some, but also, I think that's where a lot of people fail too. There's so many people in the independent film world, and go to AFM and look at these markets, and you see some of these movies that are made, and I'm like, who made that movie? Why would you? What is even happening here? How did you? This is what makes the business look bad, because you got all this kind of waste. But I think that if you can make smart films the right way, whether it's $50,000 or whether it's $5 million or $50 million, then to me that's the most important thing when going into a project, because it is. I mean, maybe it's just me, but you do feel a responsibility. You're like, look, somebody's trusting that I'm going to do the right thing, or the thing I'm telling them I'm going to do, for this giant amount of money that they're giving me. $100,000, that's a lot of money. Somebody's handing it to you. So putting a movie together in a smart way, I think, and that's, its own class for another day probably, but understanding kind of how the market works and how that really makes sense to hedge that is it's a good skill set to have, because, like I said, I think a lot of kids have this kind of like, art school mentality of like, I'm just, I'm the genius, like Tom says. They're going to recognize me one day, and all this money is just going to flow to me to make my projects. And you're like, that's just not the reality, And so the people that work and I think keep going and make films and learn the craft and advance over time are people that are making interesting, smart projects. And then the lightning in the bottle is the, Trey Schultz making Krisha, and all of a sudden now he's making, Comes at Night. Like, that's awesome, and that'd be great if you do that, but that's the exception. That's definitely not the rule, so.
I think a good question to ask yourself is, should this movie exist? Will this be additive to culture? And an escapist film is just as worthy. There's reasons why any kind of film can exist. Doesn't have to mean it has to be an important film by any means. But for me, having a conviction, this movie should exist for these reasons. Because then when I'm raising money, I'm the guy actually talking to investors, at least in the case of the 3 features. I'm talking to investors, convincing them to write me a check. And in no case did I promise them, you will make your money back. I certainly said, here's our plan, here's comps, we're very hopeful. And I say this to them, there needs to be a deeper reason you're going to invest in this. Because if it's just to get money back, there are safer, smarter investments. But if there is a deeper reason, whether it's supporting me, supporting the arts, just wanting your name, an executive producer credit is a very motivating thing. There's other reasons, and I have conviction that the thing I'm making should exist, and so that conviction comes across, and it's I think it's an important thing, because sometimes there's a lot of projects that I'm thinking of, and a few of them I'm like, I don't know if this one really needs to exist, or at least I don't have that conviction now, and that's a good sign. It's not something to put my time into.
For me, it's just who is the audience. And I don't mean that in like a icky, like we're thinking, 18 to 35-year-old males, like not in terms of the like studio model, but more, we started using the word community a lot when we talk about audience. Like what does this film have a community? And sometimes that community can be as simple as it's based off of a short, and the short has an existing fan base. That's what we did with Thunder Road. That's what we did with Greener Grass. And that, like, we at least knew, like, oh, there are fans of this type of project that we know that we can tap into, and we know we'll really enjoy it and we'll respond to it. But that can also expand to, we had a film play South by last year called Cold Wallet that was specifically, it was like a crypto heist thriller. And the crypto world, like, really kind of came in and, like, were really excited about the project and really buoyed the project. We had a film here called Under the Lights that's about a boy with epilepsy, and the epilepsy community has really come together to really support the film. And even, Queens of the Dead, the other film that we had here, it taps into the drag community and the queer community and the horror community and people that love George Romero. And so there's, it's just like finding what community is your film tapping into, and is there, like, does that audience exist?
Thomas actually made a good point, just to say that 2 seconds ago. That's one thing we've always said too when we're putting these together is I go, this is not an investment. You're not investing in the movie. Go buy stock. That's not, and people I think make that mistake too when they're speaking specifically to the business of film. You see all these pitch decks, and you see all these comps, and you're like, yeah, this is all great, and it's wonderful to talk about this, but like, there's a risk, dude. You're rolling dice. Like, you're literally rolling dice. If you can afford to lose this money, then give it to me. Otherwise, don't. Go do something else, because that's something that again, that's the smart filmmaking part of it. That's a good point, because a lot of people don't do that. And I've always said, dude, the first thing we always say, I'm like, this is not an investment. Stop saying the word investment. If it works, it's great. That's why I say we're trying to make a smart movie, so you have a real shot at that. And that's what we're all trying to do. We want the movie to work and make money and win for you, but you can't look at this like it's literally an investment. You're clearly doing it for other reasons, because half these guys that are giving us money don't need money. They're not doing it for the money. They're doing it because they want to high five their buddies in their home theater and look at, there's my name on the wall, or they want to come to festivals and hang out, and nobody wants to lose money. Let me say that. Nobody wants to lose, but the motivation is not solely to invest and make money. It's just, there's some other reason almost 99.99% of the time. So that's another, just as a talking point, a good way to kind of approach it, I found, at least for, when we talk to money people.
Awesome. So I think if there are any audience questions, we have time for a couple. And I'll repeat it before we answer. Yeah, go ahead.
How you
So the question is, if you're on a project without a music supervisor and need to license a piece of music, how do you approach that?
Music is one of those things where you can get a Beatles song for $300,000 or $100,000, or you can get a Kesha for $30,000 or $80,000, or you can get just a random classic song for $10,000 or $5,000, or you can reach out to a friend and say, hey, can I pay you $1K or $2K? So it's one of those. Sorry, I don't know what's going on.
It feels like a horror movie just started.
Aaron, cover it.
So what I would say is that it's almost impossible to predict. And so I would just reach out to the label if you know what label put it out, and ask for a quote. And you can give them the specifics, whether it's a feature film or a short film or whatever it is. If you know how it's going to be used, give them all that info, and they should be able to give you a quote. It can sometimes take a long time, so I would start early with that process. But music is one of those things that it's almost impossible to predict if you're trying to get something really, really specific.
Yeah, there's zero roadmap for music. It's true. Literally, I put a song in this last movie from a dude on YouTube, and I heard his music, and I reached out to him directly on Facebook, and he was like, "Yes, that's awesome." And then you pay the label for other songs, depending on or you take a side of it and you re-record it yourself because you can't afford the master. So there's 1,000 ways to do it, but it's definitely not. There's no standard, I guess.
I've licensed a ton of music for my films. Made one film all about music, so there was a lot of film licensing in it. And some smart things you can do is if it's an independent publisher or the artist actually owns their publishing, then it's just a conversation with them. And in my case, I basically said, hey, can I use the film for free, but I'll give you points on the back end? And they said yes. In other cases where I was dealing with a label, if you haven't made the film yet, you have more leverage. I say, I want to use this song for the film, what deal can we strike? They'll throw basically the book at you and you say, no, I can't do that. And you can really arrive at deals where you're just paying a few $100 up front, but if the film makes money, you have a step deal where you pay them. If you've already made the film and you're attached to that piece of music in the edit, it's going to be a little harder to negotiate. But I've used big films like that from bigger labels by just saying, here's $1,000 now, and if the film makes money, they'll get paid. But there's a lot of ways to do it.
And because music is so expensive, I would also say, see if there's a way to imagine what you're trying to do without that song. For the Thunder Road feature, the opening song, the opening scene has Bruce Springsteen's Thunder Road. It's based off of a short that won the grand jury at Sundance that has that song. And for the feature, we decided to shoot it both ways. We were going to shoot it with the song and then shoot it without the song, just in case we couldn't get the licensing. And when we were shooting it without the song, we all turned to each other and we were like, oh, it's so much better without the song. You can hear his feet pitter-pattering on the floor, and he just looks so much more pathetic and desperate. And it just makes it perfect. And so it actually works out better that the song didn't work. And so we didn't even try to get the license because we all preferred it without. And so, if you're really committed to a song and can get it, awesome. But if you can't, think about some alternative ways that you might be able to do it.
And it's a brilliant film, and it's a brilliant scene. Because he's trying to play it live at a funeral, and the tape deck doesn't work. So he's like, okay, imagine the song is playing. I'm going to go through it. So it's hilarious. The creative choice of let's not license the song forced an incredible comic beat on the movie. Now you can't imagine it with the song.
I wonder how many producers have brought that up to a director that looked at them with such hate in their eyes. That's amazing.
I mostly have experience with crowdfunding, and I'm sure a lot of other filmmakers do. I was wondering, what's your advice for newer filmmakers that are on their funding journey or learning about the different avenues? How do you decide between a financier or a studio or private investors?
So the question is about, for a young or first-time filmmaker navigating how to finance things, what's your advice?
The budget you're trying to make the film for would be a big determinant. If it's under $50,000, you could go crowdfunder, or I know Wolf of Snow Hollow had a really unique sort of investor crowdfunder sort of idea, but up to $500,000 to $1 million, you could really raise it through private equity, $10,000, $20,000 chunks. When you get 1.5 to 2 million range, you're probably talking to film financing companies who have a model, and there's foreign value metrics to weigh in, and it's a harder sort of game to play unless you want to raise $10,000 times 100 investors. That's a lot to manage. People do it though, but it's harder. So the budget would be determining that.
But I will say that, we've cobbled together, there's no like set path. And I think that's like something that I think is important to know, because it can be, when you're first starting out, at least this was the case for me, I was like, oh, cool, there's like this set of steps that you go through to do this and to make a movie, and I just need to learn how to do the steps properly. And the more that I was in the film world, I was like, oh, there are no steps. Especially in the indie world, you are creating your own steps, and like the model and the market is constantly changing, where no one has steps. Even people that have been doing it for years, like we're constantly trying to recalibrate and reconfigure. And so we have a $2 million movie that was partially funded through Seed and Spark, and partially funded through companies, and partially funded through nonprofit grants, and partially funded through a lab. Like it's just. And through private equity. And so it's like you kind of have to cobble together however you find. If you happen to know someone that is a wealthy individual that wants to be a private equity investor, great, then go that route. If you don't, then great, then I need crowdfunding. But there are labs, there are grants, they're not as many as there used to be, but they still do exist. So trying to do those things, and there's different versions of crowdfunding, right? So there's Kickstarter and Seed and Spark that is more just donation based, but then there's also WeFunder that is actual crowd equity. So everyone that gives to that campaign is actually an investor in that film and a profit participant. And that's how we raise the entire budget for the beta test. So there are lots of different versions, and there's constantly new things coming out. So there's no set path, and find a way to cobble together as best you can.
Any more? The question is, if you've written a feature script, what's the best way to protect that work from being copied?
I don't think you have to really worry about it. I think a lot of people worry about their films getting copied. I don't think it's really something to worry about. You get your script out there, just send it to people, and maybe if you're sending it to shady people who really have no ideas, they might copy it. But it's in my experience, it's not something to be overly concerned about. Certainly you can have it copywritten, but people can steal your idea. You can't actually protect your idea. You can only protect the written expression of it. So don't be afraid. Just get your script out there. I don't know what you might say.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. The only people that I have known that have been worried about people stealing their script are people that are just starting out, like more established screenwriters. They share their scripts all the time. But if you register it with the USCO, then you have that you can always reference in case there is a case that comes up later on that you want to be able to reference. The USCO is the best way to do it. Don't do it through the WGA, because that actually has an expiration on the copyright registration, whereas the USCO is for forever. But other than that, like, send it to the lab, submit it to the different competitions, share it with friends to get feedback. I wouldn't be afraid.
And that's the United States Copyright Office?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's also like chain of title. I mean, when you make a movie and you have to go through all the paperwork to hand it to a distributor, like, good. Believe me, no one's copying your work. It's too difficult to like rip somebody off and then get it out there. So I wouldn't even think about it.
Yeah, if you're getting ripped off, you're doing pretty good.
Yeah, that's a good thing. Good problem.
Yeah, that's like solid.
And you
feedback.
can prove your chain of title because you probably emailed somebody at some date way before they made it, and you can say, look.
My first film, the Uber one, and a guy driving an Uber who finds himself driving the man who's sleeping with his wife. When that came out, I had like an Indian producer, a Spanish producer, both approached me for like the remake rights. It didn't happen, but we had the conversation, and I was talking with my attorney, and he's like, they don't actually, like, to do what they want to do, their adaptation, they were inspired by the idea. They don't actually need to get the remake rights, but it's easier to just, do things in the proper channel of just like, hey, let me just get permission or get a deal done. So nobody's stealing scripts.
Okay, one last question.
You said one. What advice you have for people who want to, I guess, go all in, but also don't want to be extremely poor? That's my I want to live like a profitable, sustainable filmmaker life, not a poor one. Thank you.
So how to be a filmmaker without a trust fund?
That's the first thing they should teach you in film school. I've said the same thing to friends of mine. I'm like, dude, forget advice about film. It's like, learn how to manage your finances. Because if you can manage your own life, it's just constant like peaks and valleys, feast and famine. Like, if you know how to manage your life, you can live pretty efficiently and have a career and be able to focus. Because, all money is just freedom. It's just your ability to then focus on the thing you're trying to do. So if you can manage that in your own life well, then you can buy yourself a lot of time to try the grind, focus on the film, push the ball up the hill. And I think, a lot of people don't do that effectively.
I mean, I do think there is a tough thing in the independent film world where you do have to work for free often to get started, and that's like, it's a shitty thing, but it's unfortunately the reality. But I think if what I did really early on was I worked on a ton of film sets for free, and each of those people got to know me and how I worked. And then when they went on to their next projects, they wanted to bring me on, or they would recommend me to their friends. And before I knew it, I was getting so many film job offers that I had to quit my teaching job to do all of them. And so if you are able to live really, really efficiently for the first little bit, so that you can just like work, or have some kind of temper flexible job that you can work around film hours. Get on as many sets as possible to meet those people, to be able to work in film. Or if you want to be directing and writing, like, it's also possible to start off by having a normal day job and writing in your off hours. My first documentary, I directed it on the weekends. I was working full time, and I would fly out to do different interviews, fly out Friday night, do the interviews over the weekend, fly back Monday morning, and go straight to work. And so there are ways to also do it just to get the start. But once you get your start, the work will start coming in.
I think it's really noble to have a well-paying job and pursue your art on lunch breaks, mornings, nights, getting up at 4 or 5 a.m., or having a spouse that works so you can pursue that. Those are noble things, because this business is so extremely volatile that the oscillations between encouragement and discouragement are immediate, they're daily, and it is heartbreaking. To add financial instability to that is a recipe for a breakdown, and I'm pointing to myself because I quit. I'm a father of 3. I have a wife. She's here, sole breadwinner, and I quit a 6-figure job to go all in on the film dream. And I went broke doing it, and I had a major identity crisis. And I learned a lot. I wouldn't have changed it because of everything I've learned. But when people tell me, I'm thinking of quitting the job or this, I'm like, don't quit the job. Just get up early, work, and there'll be a point where it's clear I'm ready to take this risk, or I've got a partner who's there with me doing it. There will be a point where it's clear where you can really take the leap. Because I've taken other leaps and they've been successful, so there's a time and place for that. But I would just want to affirm the person who might still be living with their parents, or who have a spouse who works, or they're hustling at a normal job. Don't trade that in just yet. You can still work on your dreams.
Any way you can make it work is valid. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.